What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Backpacking Podcast. As always, I'm here with my good friend, Jeremiah Stringer. Jeremiah, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
I am doing fantastic. I am excited. Another great live stream tonight. Monday night, something to look forward to on Mondays.
I know, now that football's over, and Tom Brady now has a 7th Super Bowl. You realize Tom Brady has more Super Bowls than any team in the NFL?
I know, and I was rooting for the Bucks, man, because Mr. Backpacking with Jason Sir's a Tom Brady fan.
Yeah, we got to cheer for him. We got to pick up for Mr. Backpacking with Jason Sir, which he better be on here tonight, or I'm taking it back later. So we got a really cool sponsor for tonight. I want to go ahead and kick in with the sponsor because we have a cool sponsor tonight, a great guy that we both are big fans of.
Yeah, and actually, like, straight up friends with, get to go backpacking with. I just had a trip with him over the weekend.
Yeah, that's our good buddy Ben over at Hilltop Packs. We've always been friends with Ben. I've known Ben now for a couple of years, and he's got some killer gear. One of the things that I love about Ben's products is he's known for printing on Dyneema, which is something nobody else is doing right now, at least not the way he's doing it. And like, I've got a couple things here. I got this awesome just Dyneema like electronics ditty bag that's got 2 pockets in it, one where you can put your battery, one where you can put all your cables and everything. And it's got my little girl Ellie here, my little boy Jack, so I can always take them out on the backcountry with me. Love that. Also, they're making these new fanny packs that weigh like literally nothing. They float because they weigh so little. And I love them. They're roll top fanny packs. They can hold as little as 2 liters or as many as 4.5, 5 liters worth of stuff. So he's making killer gear.
Yeah, he actually has made me some stuff too. So here's the thing with Hilltop Packs. It's all about customization. So
all about it.
This is a food bag. I have another one over here beside me that is even larger. So you can get whatever size you want. And the grid that you see on there is actually my Instagram feed and then the logo for my channel. Or you can go with something a little smaller, like a bear bag. This is, the rock. You put your rocks in here, throw it over a tree, comes with some zinget and a carabiner. So if you want to hang your food, or if you like to do videography like I do. I mean, he prints all kinds of stuff, man. But this is basically a little bag that you can put your batteries in. It's green on one side, red on the other, and then a divider in between. And it pretty much solves the issue of knowing which batteries are dead. If you like to take pictures of your camera or anything like that out into the backcountry.
Well, and I'll be honest, I will take credit for that little tiny rucksack that you had there, because when he first came out with rucksacks, when he did the very first bear bags, I actually did a review and I got one of his original rucksacks, which are as big as your hand, and it had writing and stuff on it. And I remember doing a review and saying, the rucksack's okay, but it's so hard. It's almost hard to throw, Yeah. A week later, he does a video about the sexiest rucksack you've ever seen, and it's his brand new rucksack he made. And I'm just taking full credit for it. I'm just saying I am.
He puts those videos on his YouTube channel, Hilltop Packs. So he actually just made this is the last thing I'll say. I really do love Ben. He's a great guy. But last thing I'll say is he just uploaded this video where he drove all the way to Kentucky and delivered Backpacking with Jason's backpack. So he makes backpacks too, and he can print on Dyneema for those too. So thank you, Ben and Hilltop Packs, for sponsoring today's episode.
And thank you for giving back to the community as well. I know they're big into Leave No Trace and to giving part of what they make as a company back to public lands. So thanks, Ben, for all you're doing. You're the man. We appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah.
So let's get on to what everybody's here for now. We have a special guest tonight.
Legendary, bro. I don't even know how to describe him.
I would say he's the only person I know of to hike 7,000 miles and then go hike 5,000 after it. Like, nobody does this kind of stuff. Everybody knows him for eating beans, rice, and Fritos. And somebody posted something about beaver water, which we're going to have to ask about in a little bit. But I want to welcome to the podcast for the first time ever, Mr. Andrew Skurka. How are you, sir?
Doing great. You guys are just cracking me up sitting here. Just the energy level is so good, and I'm reading all the comments coming through. Your audience is pretty funny too.
Oh yeah,
looks like you guys have a nice little community here. Yeah.
We love to have fun, man. I want to mention a couple of things about you as we're getting started here to give everybody some context. So you're 38, living in Colorado, but
It'd be 40 next month.
oh,
I'm living in Colorado.
Oh,
Yeah.
welcome to the club.
I am. I didn't think I was going to have 2 COVID birthdays, but it's looking that way.
well, the crazy things, and I've been reading up on your website, which is andrewskurka.com, if other people want to check it out. So you did the Alaska Yukon expedition, which took 6 months and was 4,700 miles, and the Great Western Loop, 7 months and almost 6,900 miles, and then the sea to sea route, 11 months, 7,800 miles. I was reading the average miles per day. I don't even know how the human body can do that.
Well, and you did almost like 1,500 miles of snowshoeing on that, right?
On the sea to sea trip, yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
Was it like 1,300 miles of snowshoeing, 1,200 miles of snowshoeing? It was a lot. It was like half the length of the Appalachian Trail on snowshoes. Yeah.
That's definitely not as quick as your normal hiking, is it?
And then the Alaska trip had. The Alaska trip had, I'm just trying to remember, like 1,200 miles of skiing on that one. So the big expeditions have usually been kind of multi-sport.
Well, which one? I know this is probably a hard question to answer, but if you could do it all over again, and you could pick one and it's your favorite, I know they're all different experiences, but which would it be and why?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of like asking, like, what child is your favorite? And you have to understand. I mean, I think at the time they all worked for me. They were like perfect for where I was at that point in my life and where I was at that point in my sort of like backpacking career, if you will. So the sea to sea route, I started when I was 24 years old, or maybe even 23. And it was like, in hindsight, it was like young man goes and sees his country. Like that's what that trip was all about. And there was like quite a few sort of wilderness experiences sort of added in there, but I think, like, looking back at it now, it was a lot more cultural than I expected, and there are a lot more human interactions that sort of defined the trip. And then the Great Western Loop I was 27, and that was my like the pinnacle physical achievement as a backpacker. Like how fast, how far, how light could I go? And that was kind of what that was all about. And then the Alaska trip was mega, like, long distance epic adventure. And that's like kind of an expert skill set. And those other trips that I'd done previously, like, they were they were the stepping stones to something like Alaska.
It's just
Crazy.
insane. You mentioned like just pushing yourself to your limits and seeing how light and seeing how fast you can go. How light was light?
It was light. I mean, this is like pre dynamic composite fabric too. So I think my base pack weight on the Great Western Loop was probably 8-ish pounds.
Mm.
Wow.
So, and it also was kind of pre-electronics as well. So those two weight pieces might sort of counterbalance each other. So there wasn't, like, I don't think Spot hadn't even come out at that point. And like, I didn't have a phone. So, like, there wasn't that. It was, I know, it was 2007. It wasn't that long ago.
That was the first year of the iPhone. That was the first year of the iPhone. So they probably weren't even out when you were doing that.
Yeah, and I remember seeing an iPhone for the first time. I think maybe it was that Christmas when I got back. My brother-in-law's brother-in-law had one. And but never, I mean, like, I never put it together like, oh, one day this is going to be a critical piece of backpacking equipment. So base weight on that trip was 8-ish pounds, and I averaged 33 miles a day for 208 days. I took only 7 days off.
Man, that's crazy.
And like, I've never done it, but I should go back and like figure out where I camped and like figure out kind of how much vertical I was doing per day. Because like I just remember like getting into the San Juans in Colorado and just like still rocking out like 35-mile days. And if you're on the Continental Divide Trail in Colorado and you're rocking out 35 miles a day, I mean, you're probably doing 10,000 vert a day. And I was sleeping on a foam pad and getting up in the morning and doing it again. It's like crazy.
Okay, so this is crazy. So my question is for you, what What was it when you first did that first trail that made you go, it'd be a really good idea to just like go hike thousands and thousands of miles and basically do more than a marathon every single day of the week?
Well, I built up to it gradually. So, like when I started the Appalachian Trail, like I was disillusioned when I did the Appalachian Trail. I was thinking it was going to be like this, this uh, immersive experience in nature, and I was going to be like the next John Muir Trail or next John Muir coming out. Like by the time I hit Katahdin, and I get out there and I was like, oh, this is hard. this is really hard.
Yeah.
I was carrying too much. I just didn't have, and I didn't have any basic skills. I didn't know how to purify my water. I didn't know how to select a good campsite. I didn't know how to navigate. Like I would get to the road and like left meant west and right meant east. That's like all I knew. And so it was hard, but I was drawn to that too. Like I'm an endurance athlete, by background. So I've been running competitively since I've been 14 years old, and I enjoy that physical aspect of it. And I don't like to quit either. So I kind of, pushed through that, got it done, started to enjoy it, especially towards the end once I kind of like figured things out. And then that C2C trip, that was, I think I ended up averaging, like a marathon a day, maybe a little bit less than that for 300 days. That trip was, I'd say my pace was a little bit more dictated by the conditions, and also just it's kind of what I was like naturally doing anyway. It turns out that if you're like walking across eastern Montana, if you walk for 10 hours, you probably are going to cover 30 miles. So,
wow.
I don't care how fit you are.
Let's take it all the way back to the origin story here. So my very first backpacking trip, I fell in love with it because my father-in-law asked me to go, and I borrowed all this gear, and he took me on like 40 to 50 miles through the Smokies on the AT. Where did you fall in love with backpacking, or did you always grow up doing it?
I didn't. I grew up like day hiking and mountain biking and like building trails like around the swamps in my backyard. I grew up in a family who was like we would go on family vacations up to New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, more because it was cheap and it was reasonably accessible from southeastern Mass. But I didn't grow up around a lot of nature. And I'm trying to think of like where I really fell in love with backpacking. Boy, I don't even think it was on the Appalachian Trail now that I think about it. Like I think that that trip was so hard on me, just physically hard, emotionally hard, that I probably fell in love more with it during the C2C trip, where I was really in beautiful country and the mechanics of backpacking were easy. They were second nature. So I was just really able to kind of enjoy myself.
That's awesome.
But it took a while. I knew that there was potential there. I kind of kept on forcing it almost until I fell in love with it, I think. I remember that very first backpacking trip I ever did. I was in I was in college, and I flew out to San Francisco, where my sister was in college. She was in grad school, and I borrowed her Buick Century, and I had bought some backpacking gear, and I went out to Yosemite, and this is in the middle of March, and like did a couple of overnights in Yosemite. And I just remember freezing my tail off, like, basically every night. I remember my water bottle froze. Like, it's just, I remember like having 4 pots for like a dinner, like just crazy amounts of stuff. Just
Well, we have a good comment on here you need to see. This is Backcountry Exposure. This is Devin Ashby. He teaches backpacking. Yeah. He says, I want Andrew to know that I use his photo of the dead cow in Harris, Washington as an example of you never know what's in your water with his backpacking season.
Yeah, Harris Wash. There's so this is Harris Wash is a tributary to the Escalante River in southern Utah. And this was 2009, and I was doing like most of the Hayduke Trail and then some stuff in the Grand Canyon as part of like a 8-week-long trip. And I was down at the Escalante, and I filled up my water bottle there at the river, and then I started hiking up Harris Wash, and I came up on this dead cow. It was like and it had been there a while, because like I just remember like these pieces of skin were sort of like rippling in the water. like down with the current. And I don't know if it had gotten stuck in the sand or if it had just died out there, but yeah, it was just in the middle of the creek. So thankfully I hadn't taken any of that water or drank any of that water. So I quickly dumped that out and filled up a little further upstream.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
We just had some friends that went backpacking up in the Boundary Waters this past week, and they hit negative 27 degrees in their hiking. And somebody wanted to ask the question, what was the coldest temps you have been exposed to on the trip?
About that same thing. Yeah, 25 below, 30 below, and that's cold. So I think like the way to think about cold temperatures is like for most people, like the idea of 20 below zero is it's this abstraction because they've never experienced anything remotely close. But figure that 20 below zero is 40 degrees colder than freezing. So go in the opposite direction. Think about like if it's 72 degrees, think about the comfort difference between 72 and 32, and then flip it the other way. And it's that same difference in like how things operate at those temperatures. Yeah, like nothing at those temperatures, like nothing works. So like the rubber bindings on your snowshoes, they get really brittle. The rubber gasket for like a Whisperlight stove is prone to freezing and cracking, and then your stove doesn't work. The snow state like on a crystal level, like a microscopic crystal level, it stays really sharp, so your skis don't glide very well in snow that's that cold. Yeah, it's pretty wild conditions.
Wow.
And you just can't. Incredible. Yeah, I guess the other thing I'd say, like, you can't let anything get away from you because the margin of error is really thin. So, for example, if your hands get cold, so either you're not paying attention to them or you have to like take off your mitts to like maybe tie a shoe or something like that. It's hard to get your hands back warm if you can't get your hands warm, then you're not able to like zip up a jacket, or you're not able to start a stove, or you're not able to set up your tent. So things have these cascading effects in the temperatures that cold.
I used to watch the show on History Channel called Mountain Men. Have you heard of it?
No.
Well, it basically follows different like mountain men, if you will. They're basically, country boys or whatever in different parts of the country. And one of the guys is in Alaska, and his name's Marty. And so every season he flies his little plane, because apparently, planes in Alaska are everything. Like they're one of your modes of transportation if you have to get somewhere. So every season he has to fly his plane up to this remote cabin that he built, and he has to hit it just right so that he can hunt and bring back food for his family. And so I remember this one episode, I don't know how cold, but it's super cold, right? And it's wintertime, and all of a sudden his snowmobile quits. And this snowmobile, he actually took it completely apart, flew all the pieces up because it's too heavy to just put in the plane. It's a little one-person plane. And then he has to reassemble it. So he knows it inside and out. So it quits on him. And then all of a sudden he's in a survival situation. And he takes off his gloves, and it's like seconds. He's trying to work on screws. He doesn't have any dexterity with these big, thick gloves on. And then he's like, goes from riding his snowmobile, checking his traps, to a survival situation just because one part of his snowmobile malfunctions. And he's like, takes off his gloves. He's like, he only has so long to screw the screw. And he's like, I can't feel my fingers anymore. Did you ever get in any situations kind of similar to this where you're like, man, this is a scary situation?
I think I'm just trying to rack my brain. I was always okay. Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of like very uncomfortable moments. So for example, like every morning, not like, I'm being hyperbolic. So for the first 38 days, my feet were dry because the snow wasn't melting and it was cold and my boots were able to stay dry. Starting on day 38, the snow conditions changed and the creek started opening up, and like I was losing my ice bridges, and my feet were wet starting like day 38 all the way through day 100 and 74, I think it was, all except for like 2 or 3 days. But what was in the springtime, what was happening is that my feet would they get wet during the day, and then my boots would freeze overnight because it was still dropping down to like 0, 10 degrees at night. So every morning I would have to like jam my warm feet into these cold frozen boots. And then and I had learned like that night, when you get into camp and take your boots off, like peel them wide open, like pull the tongue out, like loosen up the laces, because then at least you can get your foot inside the boot. And then and tighten them up. Then like you jam them in there, and your feet immediately get cold, and you tighten them up as best you can with the frozen laces, and you just try to get moving and get warm back up, because that's the only thing that's going to save you. Yeah. So some really uncomfortable, like regularly uncomfortable moments, but never a time when I was like, oh, I might lose a finger. Yeah, nothing like that.
I've been there sticking my foot in those frozen shoes. Yeah, polar vortex come down 2 or 3 years ago, and my wife and another couple were supposed to go on this trip with me, and I was like, guys, it's going to be like 12 degrees out, and in Kentucky, like 32 is pretty cold.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm still going to go though, but I don't think it's safe for you all to go. And they're like, well, go ahead. So me and another buddy went, and then sure enough, everything was iced over. Like the next morning, I just threw my pants, like I slept in my base layers, threw my pants just at the bottom of the tent inside, picked them up the next morning. They were just like frozen solid. You tried to put them on, had to hide back out in my camp clothes.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, you said that you were laying on a foam pad at some point. Did you actually stay warm on that?
Yeah. So like the foam pad that I used, we have these R ratings nowadays for sleeping pads,
right?
And they don't accurately capture the temperature, the thermal resistance of a foam pad. They really should. Foam pads should really have their own like measuring scale, because like if you look at the R ratings of the foam pads, you're like, oh man, that looks frigid. But I mean, I slept on like regularly nights of like 10 below, so occasionally 20 below on a foam pad on top of snow, and was fine. That's like the 3/4 inch. It's Thermarest. I think they used to call it the Solite. I'm not sure if I don't know what it is nowadays, if they've rebranded it. So and that was enough. I also could get by too with I think a Neo Air is actually just warm enough for wintertime. Like I'd say like spring winter conditions. So like maybe what you didn't like. So for you guys, like all winter long, you could use a Neo Air. I think for like me in Colorado, I could use a Neo Air maybe starting in like March. And in Alaska, similar story.
Yeah. Wow. Now you had mentioned earlier, we were talking about you being out there backpacking, and you talked about, well, we didn't have the smartphones and all of that. Were you doing the compass and map thing back then?
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine that.
Yeah, I'm just like, here's the thing.
Wow.
You say that nowadays, and people are like, what are you talking about? So my question is, when did you learn that? Because obviously when you were on the Appalachian Trail, you probably didn't have that.
No, on the Appalachian Trail, I mean, you don't need to know navigation when you're on the Appalachian Trail. You follow white blazes, and like I said before, you get to a junction, and left is west and right is east, more or less.
Right.
And so I learned. Let's see, when did I learn to navigate? I started to learn to navigate my first summer here in Colorado, which would have been 2003. So I'm going to sound really old here. So I was interning for Go Light that summer. So. You guys were like, Go Light? Go what?
Yeah,
I know what Go Light is.
No, I don't know what it is. Tell me.
So, you don't know what Go Light is, really?
No.
Go Light, wow, okay, boy. Go Light is the original lightweight backpacking company. It's a commercialized version of Ray Jardine's designs.
Okay.
So, it started with, the first year they came out, it was like 10 or 11 products, and they were all based on Ray Jardine's design. So it was like the Breeze Pack and the what was the shelter called? It was a tarp. It was like this really crazy tarp that you needed like an engineering degree to pitch. Can't remember what it was called now. So So I was interning for GoLight, and I was every single weekend I would go up into the Indian Peaks and just hike all over. And that was, I kind of learned through the School of Hard Knocks how to navigate. I was pretty bad at it to start, and then over time I just kind of got better. And you kind of like, I was always in situations where it was sort of sink or swim. So I remember on 2000 and this would have been 2006. I did the California section of the Pacific Crest Trail, and that it had been a really heavy winter. I was going through at the end of June, beginning of July, and it wasn't like now where there's just sort of this trough as soon as the through hikers go through. So there are very few tracks to go off of, and I was having to navigate with the high steer totally covered in snow. And
Wow.
And you needed to kind of figure it out, because like what else were you going to do? So,
I know, now you just point your phone and turn it, and you're like, oh,
yeah, totally. I mean,
way.
like, I can't even tell you how lucky you have it right now, because like as I think about this, so we were using the Pacific Crest Trail, the official Pacific Crest Trail guidebook. It was a Mountaineers Press product, and it would have like the book was, let me grab a book here. This is like perfect. So the book was like about this big, and you'd open it up, and there would be like a sliver of a map, like right along the column, like this. And so you were almost seeing nothing. Like you had like a half mile of topographic information, and that was it. And that's what we were navigating with. It was crazy. Like,
that's insane.
I mean, it's ironic that people have been dying in recent years and no one died back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got a buddy who's a former Marine, and this summer he's teaching me how to navigate using a compass and a map. Just because I think it's a good skill, first of all, to know, because electronics can fail. But I can't imagine you doing all that stuff in Alaska and all the places you were at with absolutely no GPS whatsoever. That's impressive. That alone is impressive.
It's not that. I mean, learning to read a map is not that hard. I mean, this is like, I mean, I teach this all summer long to people who have had no prior experience. It's really not that hard. You could do it if you wanted to. The key thing is just that you have to apply it. So, like the way that we in a trip setting, I mean, we will, like, the first day we'll do a map reading tutorial, and at that point, our thought is like, okay, well, we've taught you how to read a map. So we've taught you how, like, about contour lines and scale and shading and it's like what different features look like. So now it's up to you to be like constantly looking around and like figuring out where we are. And it takes a couple of days, but if the clients sort of are on it, if they're pretty diligent about like looking around often and like kind of sort of doing that terrain association of like figuring out, like if they're hiking up a steep trail, they look at their map and they're like, okay, so this is what a trail going up those contour lines, kind of like, that's what it looks like in the field. If they're doing that regularly, they get the hang of it after a couple of days. I'm sure
you got somebody who just said, I learned it from your.
There you go. Right. There you go. It's George. I think if I remember right, George, I think he was on an Olympics trip, 2014, maybe.
Wow.
Maybe he'll chime in and confirm for me.
Well, see, your situation, like, the technology existed, but I assume it was so expensive and not like readily available. You're kind of forced into, hey, if I don't learn this skill, I can die out there. So you just practice it.
Yeah, I would actually go. My decision to navigate still based on map and compass. It's actually not a cost issue. It's more. I just think it's a better system. So, like with a paper maps, like I've got this big piece of topographic information, and I can see all sorts of things. In comparison, when you're on your smartphone screen, it's much smaller, and it's just like the pinching and zooming. What I see is that people who are like just in this little window, they get lost about where they are in the big picture of things. So I prefer map and compass, like paper map and compass, because it's a more I think it's a better sort of viewing experience. It doesn't need any batteries. It doesn't, if I drop it, it doesn't, there are no issues with like reflectivity of like sunlight or polarized sunglasses, or I just think it's a better experience. I will say that there's like, they're complementary to each other. So I think you can, depending on your understanding of the local terrain, I think I could see the case being made for both a paper maps being your primary source, or smartphone being your primary source. So as an example, so like Alan Dixon is one of my other guides, and he, like when we go to an area that he knows really well, he's just using his phone because he understands like the macro topography. So he's not lost in that screen, if you will. So he's just like occasionally getting on there, taking a quick look, seeing exactly where he is, and he's done. Whereas people who don't understand the macro topography as well, they don't understand the, you know, where the drainages are and where the high peaks are, like they need that paper map to just sort of give them a constant reference about where they are in the scheme of things.
I love that you use the terminology there, the macro, because that transcends so many things, like not just looking at a map and backpacking. Like myself personally, I'm a high school math teacher, and basically all these kids see is this one little piece, like you're teaching them this, and they get lost because they don't understand the whole big picture.
Yep.
And that applies to so many things. You really got a gift with words, man.
Yeah, you kind of. I think it's pretty easy to get bogged down in the weeds on a lot of things and not kind of see that thing. I think you're spot on with it, making that analogy. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about the AT. So first, was that your like first experience with long distance backpacking for an extended amount of time, or did you do?
Yes.
Okay, so to follow up from that, at what point did some of those things start clicking with you on, like, you know, you mentioned nobody taught you how to filter water, or
Yeah.
you know, there's things that you had to figure out. At what point did the gear choices start clicking with you, how to do this and that, just the everyday things on trail?
Yeah. So I'd say like right away, like I kept a diary back then. I still have it. It's downstairs. The very first diary entry has a list of this is family friendly, right?
Yeah.
A list of things that I need to throw out or send home the next time I'm in town. So I like very quickly realized that like I am carrying too much stuff and I'm not going to use like a lot of this. But a lot of it was like a lot of the things that I would pick up on would be I'd see someone else doing something, and I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Or I'd see like somewhat like a piece of gear that someone had, and be like, oh, that's interesting. So a couple of examples. I remember I was hiking with a couple other guys, and we were at the base of this big climb in Georgia, and like this, like I remember it being like, it felt like we were climbing up like Mount Everest. It was so steep, and it was. And this guy, so we're sitting down at the bottom of this thing at like a shelter or a creek or something, and he filled up with water, and he drank a liter while he was sitting there. And I'm like, why are you chugging water? He's like, well, like, you know, if I drink it right here, I don't have to carry it up the hill. I'm like, wow, that's actually like really smart, because here I was with carrying like 2 or 3 liters of water up this stupid hill, and he put a liter into his belly right at the bottom, let it start doing work for him. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Like that's a good little tip there. Another time I remember hiking, like the first couple of days, and I remember seeing like, it looked like someone had gone through with like an aerator on the side of the trail. And like there's all these little like divots along the side of the trail. I'm like, what is causing this? And then I met some other hikers with trekking poles, and I was like, oh, trekking poles, of course. And like I was like struggling so much that I contemplated, like there was this group of people, and they had like left their backpacks and their trekking poles on the trail and like went off the trail for some reason. And I contemplated leaving one of the people all of the cash that I had and taking their trekking poles because I realized how valuable they would be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My first trip, I didn't bring trekking poles, and then there's a couple people that did. Or like one guy brought a broken fishing pole, and he's like, "I'm just going to turn this upside down and using it as a walking pole." And I learned really quick. I was like, "I got to cut me a stick or something, because this is hard."
Yeah.
Well, speaking of trekking poles, is it true that you scare away large animals with trekking poles?
I don't do it on like regularly. It's just one time in particular that's become famous.
I'm curious. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I was in Alaska. Like all things happen in Alaska, right? So I was in the Brooks Range, which is like northern Alaska. I was in the middle of a 24-day stretch without crossing a road or seeing another human being, and it was technically night. I remember it being like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, but I was still hiking because it's 24 hours of daylight. And I had this like moment where it's like, oh, you should like, this would be a good time to like see if there are any animals grazing up on the hills. So I kind of looked left and like, looked up, and as I started to turn around, I heard all this commotion coming out of the brush, and this grizzly bear came out of the willows in the small clearing where I was. And I knew what it was. It was charging through the willows. I'm like, there's only one thing that makes that much noise. And as it came into the clearing, it kind of took. I remember taking a right step, and I was like, oh, thank God, because that's like he wasn't continuing straight towards me. And of course, I'm like yelling at him. I got my bear spray out. So this bear is like, okay, peace, I'm out of here, and he like runs away. And then like half hour, 45 minutes later, I had that same feeling of like, hey, you should like look around for a minute. And I did the same thing. I looked left and looked right around my right shoulder, and there's this grizzly bear charging at me, like just like bolting at me, running across the gravel braids, like this gravel braids in a river, just running right at me. And by the time I saw it, it was close enough that I didn't really have any time to like react to it. So I just I knew I needed to get to my bear spray, but I was carrying my trekking poles in my hands, like that were going to interfere with me getting my bear spray. So I just took my trekking pole and threw the trekking pole at the bear. And this trekking pole landed right in front of the bear, like dagger side down. And I was yelling at the bear, and this bear is like, I don't know what the hell you are, but a caribou has never thrown anything at me before. And it took a right-hand turn and started running away from me as fast as it possibly could. And as it ran away, it left behind like this 3-foot-long streak of red berry shit. It was just like a hose of red berries that came out of its ass. And so and then there's this great video. It's online if anyone wants to see it. It's like I look like a madman. Yeah.
How many times do you think you told that story?
Well, it's in. So I don't know how many times I've done my Alaska, like a slideshow about my Alaska trip, probably 100 plus, and it's in that slideshow. So yeah, I've seen that video more than a lot. It's kind of even for me has lost its novelty a little bit. Yeah.
So pretty soon, I don't know if you know her, but we're having Heather Onish Anderson on, and I read her book, in anticipation of talking to her, and she talks about her animal encounters, and she literally gets to the point where she's like, I don't care about this mountain lion. Like, I'm ready to fight it off. Nothing's going to stop me from my goal. Did you ever run into any moments where you really had to like face those demons inside, and you're like, because you said, I don't like to quit, but you get to the point where you're like, man, I think I'm going to break.
Yeah. I mean, there are always those moments in a long trail. It was never an animal that sort of like got between me and my goal. It was always the conditions of just like, boy, this is hard, and it's been hard, and maybe it's not that fun right now. And but I've done enough of these trips to know that it can't always get worse. So at some point, the tides will turn. At least that's been my experience. And then I think too, there's a point where you've sacrificed enough that it's much easier to endure. I think that the hardest part of a long distance trip is at the beginning, where you don't have any skin in the game. All that you've done is spent money, and but you haven't really put in a lot of time, like a big physical commitment to it yet. And I think that's kind of the time when it's easiest to quit, because you don't feel that vested yet, and the goal too is also can be just really intimidating. I mean, you're talking about I mean, not to pick on anyone in the Appalachian Trail, like the Appalachian Trail, it's 2,100 miles, and there are hundreds of people who do it every year. But that's still that is just an absurd distance. And the idea of walking from Georgia to Maine, it's difficult to wrap your mind around. How do you, how can you it's too big to sort of conceptualize. It's that kind of you can't eat an elephant in one bite kind of thing. And the longer the trips get, the more impossible they seem. I mean, can you imagine being at the Atlantic Ocean and being like, yeah, I think over the next 11 months, I'm gonna walk to the Pacific.
No.
That's crazy. It's crazy talk.
Well, we actually had Rue McKinnon on here not too long ago, and he's doing the American Perimeter Trail, where he's literally walking the perimeter of the United States. I think he's going to be done soon if he's not already. But yeah, you talk about that, and he was kind of the same way. He's like, who gets up in the morning and says, I think I'm just going to hike thousands of miles.
Yeah, but you can do you can do a mile, and you can do you can hike up to lunch, and you can hike to dinner, and you just stitch enough of those efforts together, and suddenly one day you go to bed and you're like, wow, I've hiked 1,000 miles. Damn, look at me.
Yeah. So the bear situation, was that the most scared you've ever been on trail?
Yeah, I think that was probably the closest. I can't think of another situation where it was that touch and go. There were some other there's some difficult conditions I've been in, really cold and wet, really uncomfortable. I remember, but nothing where I was could have been dead in the next 5 minutes. Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. You can see them it's different now. So that was my Alaska trip was 10 years ago. And it's just, I'm in a different phase of my life. I'm 40 years old, married, I own a home, got a small business. The idea of doing some of those trips, putting myself out there to that same degree a little, it's oh yeah, that's what a young man does.
It's a little more at stake now.
Yeah.
So you're talking about earlier how whenever you first started and you're immediately starting to figure out some of the mistakes that you had made gear choice wise and that kind of thing. Can you remember any of the items you just had that immediate regret about, and you're like, why would I bring this?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. You ready for them?
Yes.
I brought. Let me preface this. So I think the best way to think about backpacking, the best way to think about backpacking is that there's this spectrum of styles, and on one hand you have the backcountry camper. So that is you're going to go out and you're going to just hike into a close camp, and you're going to set up, and you're going to eat really well, and you're going to write in your journal, and you're going to take awesome photos with your large format camera, and you're going to go fishing, and you're going to have big campfires, okay, whatever else. The other style is embodied by the thru hike of an overnight day hiker. So they're hiking all day, dawn to dusk. They're going to bed, sleeping 8 hours, maybe if they're being generous to themselves, and they get up and do it again. And for them, it's all about kind of time on feet, distance, etc. So for me, starting the Appalachian Trail, what I on this spectrum, and I didn't understand that if I was trying to hike to Maine, that maybe I optimize my comfort for the trail instead of thinking that if I spent time in camp reading Ed Abbey's an Ed Abbey book, that somehow I was going to get bonus points further. That's not the way it works, right?
Right.
So I had a copy of Desert Solitaire. Just this absurd amount of toiletries, like travel sized shampoo and conditioner and like a loofah scrub and lamp. But then I also had like I had one of those like expandable. I know. I had a 2-liter pot, a 1.5-liter pot, a bowl. I was pretty like frugal college kid, so I had a lot of white gas fuel in my dorm room, and I didn't want to have to buy it along the way. So I was carrying 2 full 20-ounce fuel bottles. If you did the math, I think that you probably could get to West Virginia with that much fuel. Okay.
Wow.
So what else? Thing. So in addition to all that crap that I had, I didn't have anything that I actually needed. So I remember I had a wind or rain or water resistant jacket and pants that weren't waterproof. Like they weren't like they didn't have a membrane. I had a wool sweater that like I would wear to class as like my mid layer. My sleeping bag was like 40-degree synthetic, so like froze most nights. I mean, I didn't have trekking, like I just didn't have stuff. Oh, and then I had a so I got to Hot Springs, North Carolina, and I was like, I gotta lighten up. How am I going to do this? So one obvious way to lighten up was to get a different shelter. And I was carrying a Sierra Designs clip flashlight. I can't believe I still remember all this stuff. Sierra Designs clip flashlight 10, which is I'm like dating myself again here, but this is like the original, this is the first tent that had clips for the poles rather than like sleeves. Okay, that's why it was called the clip flashlight. It was like revolutionary. But it weighed 3.5 pounds. So I was like, all right, well, how could I lighten up? And I figured that I could save a lot of weight by carrying a water resistant or waterproof bivy sack, like a outdoor research bivy sack. But which that thing weighed like 18 or 20 ounces, I don't remember, but it was like made completely out of Gore-Tex. And I used that thing all like through the rest of the trail. But I'm in New York in July, and it's like nighttime lows of like 75 or 80 degrees, and I'm stuck inside of this sweaty, stinky, clammy cocoon bivy sack.
And you can't leave it open because of the bugs. So
there you go. Right.
Yeah.
Oh
wow. My gosh. So we got a great question for you. That's our buddy Miyagi. He says, having guided many trips, what is your biggest hiking etiquette pet peeve?
Ooh. What a great question.
Biggest pet peeve. I'm just trying to think.
There's so many.
No, that's almost a shortage. I'm trying to think of things that I get irritated about. I mean, I guess a couple that are specific to our trip. So, I get irritated by loud canister stoves. So like we kind of emphasize we try to get clients to take alcohol fuel or alcohol stoves because they're it's just easier to deal with for fuel because a lot of clients are flying in, and we can very easily have the fuel for them at the trailhead. And the alcohol stoves, though, they're quiet, so you're having dinner and just you just sort of, it's these natural sounds of like the wind or the water or sometimes the mosquitoes. But someone has sometimes someone will bring a canister stove that sounds like a jet engine, and suddenly for the 5 minutes that they have on, it's like and you're screaming at the person next to you, "Hey, how was your day?" So that's a little bit of a pet peeve. Another pet peeve that's specific to my trip. So we supply all the breakfast and dinners, and the cooking directions more or less are heat up, boil 10 ounces of water, throw everything in, and eat it. Okay, but I can't tell you how many times every night I'll get Andrew, how many ounces of water? So I try not to get too frustrated. It's actually usually the clients who pick up on it. They're like, "Wow, you are so patient," because I'm getting tired of hearing that question being asked.
That's so
I got
funny.
another good question on here too. Says I'll retire from over 30 years in the military and present myself to a through hike. AT or CDT? Which one would you recommend?
Oh, it really depends on what you're looking for. I think both. I don't know if I'm the person to ask anymore. I can tell you what they, my understanding of them and kind of what they, what they maybe used to be like. The AT is like, it's great for a first time through hiker if you are from the East Coast, or if you've never spent. I would actually like, even if you're from a totally different part of the country. So I'm thinking like a semi-arid or arid part of the country, because it just might be like, living here in Colorado now, I love going back east because it's just so green and there's all this water and there's like all these like plants, and it's a really interesting place for me to go. But if you're from the East Coast, it makes sense to do because it's what you know. And if you do like the Pacific Crest or the Continental Divide Trail, might struggle to go hike 2,100 miles through a green tunnel. So maybe best to kind of get it out of the way. But
It makes sense.
in terms of scenery, the CDT is pretty spectacular, and I think it's unlike the PCT. It's preserved quite a bit of its wilderness character. I don't think it's quite yet been. It hasn't been gut hooked yet, if you will.
How
At
is
least not to the same degree.
I get that.
I was just thinking about gut hooks earlier when you were talking about the lack of technology and how you're using the maps. Like I did the long trail, and gut hooks was everything, had all the water sources, shelters, pictures attached, like stay here.
It's crazy how, I remember when that app came out, and I remember thinking like, oh, well, that sounds like a hobby project. That sounds like someone who's a little overzealous about the future of apps. Yeah, he clearly saw it, and I'm a Jurassic. Yeah.
That's okay.
That's all good. Another question for you. What are your thoughts on X-Pac versus DCF for backpack material?
Yeah, so let me think. So I guess the point what you need to know is that both materials are excellent, and you probably can't go wrong either way. I think if you start digging into the details of them, and let me be more specific on that. Unless you are like going to be dragging this pack like up like sandstone slabs, or you're going to be doing canyoneering, or you're going to be doing like some high altitude mountaineering, and you're like constantly packing skis or crampons, I don't think it's going to matter. Like both these packs, both of those materials are going to withstand at least one through hike, probably multiple through hikes. And to put it in perspective, like what's the grid, the Dyneema fabric, like with the white grid stop. That's what I used for like I used a Go Light jam on my Great Western Loop, and used it almost from start to finish. And actually, maybe I did use it from start to finish. And that was 7 months long, and that pack like withstood. Every seam was intact. Like it never tore or anything. And that's, by today's standards, that's kind of a very mediocre pack fabric. So either pack fabric will be fine. I think when you start digging down the details, I don't really understand the DCF for pack fabrics. As for shelter fabrics, Dyneema composite fabric is amazing. It's half the weight, more waterproof, and stronger than any coated nylon. And that's just like ridiculous. For pack fabric, I think it loses some of those superlatives, because it's not. I guess the only real selling point is that it's waterproof. So you could, like, if the pack is designed right, you could tape the seams. It's like, so the pack could be pretty darn waterproof, but I don't know. I think a pack liner at 2.5 ounces works pretty well too. So
yeah. I got the simple answer for that question. Just get one of each, man. Yeah. That's what I would
maybe
do.
the other
$600.
answer
Go spend $600 on 2 packs.
Maybe the other answer there too is that probably the fit and the features in the pack probably make a much bigger difference at that point than the pack fabric.
Right. Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about what you do now, because you said some of that stuff was a young man's game that you've done in the past.
Yeah.
So what is
Yeah.
it that you do full time now?
It's not quite full time because I still have
Okay.
my hands on a few other things. But the biggest part of what I do is I'm guiding backpacking trips, or I'm running a guiding company at this point. So it's this year we're running 44 trips with 368 clients. I've
Wow.
got 15 or 16 guides working for me. So it's a pretty big operation at this point.
And what's the name of that company?
Yeah.
What's the
It's
name of
Andrew
it?
Skurka Andrew Skurka Adventures.
I
Yeah.
like it.
I mean, it's like,
You're
yeah,
awful-
I don't. So it's fun. When I started this, I never I had to apply for like a commercial permit, and they're like, all right, well, you need a company name. I'm like, company name? I'm like, well, it's just me. So just like, all right, Andrew Skurka Adventures. So it sounds like a law firm, but there's no branding of it. Yeah, there's no branding. It's not like Southern Yosemite Mountain Guides or Alpine Guides or like just there's nothing, or Outward Bound, or I mean there's just it's like I'm still deeply embedded in this brand and this program.
Well, I was about to say, man, you're awful stuck on yourself. Just got to get your name out there on everything, don't you?
I like it. It's on brand, man.
No, that's great, man.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on an hour right now, and what I want to do is I want to give you the opportunity, just tell people everywhere they can find you as far as like your tours and everything that you're doing, just so people can find you and find more information about what you're doing and connect with you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm pretty easy to search because my last name is pretty unique. So the last name is Skurka, Skurka, and I've got a website. I'm on Instagram. Try not to. I'm contemplating that. Facebook, a little less active, and not doing much on YouTube. You guys are dominating the space. I don't think I could compete. So I think I'll just stick to my blog and stick to running trips.
Very cool, man. Well, Jeremiah, you got any more questions for Andrew before we sign off of here?
No, I want to make sure that anybody that wants to get in contact with you to arrange or work with you, be one of your clients, make sure that they can easily find that. I think we said the website is just your name.com, right? AndrewSkurka.com.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence.
You guys are who really enjoyed this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We try to have a good time when we can. So thank you so much. If you want to hang out in the green room, we'll be with you in just a second, but we're going to go ahead and
good
sign
deal.
off
Yeah.
here.
I'll see you over there. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. That was great, man. These don't get boring at all, do they?
No, dude. He is next level. Like, I mean, I could talk to him all night.
Oh, I know. I still can't get over just the amount of miles this man has done. Blows my mind. Like,
when I first started researching him and I was seeing like all the trips that he's done, I was like, how in the world, I'm not going to walk that far in my entire life if you counted every single step, from here on out.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, folks, real quick, just to remind everybody, in June, we are going to be moving this live stream solely over to the Backpacking Podcast YouTube channel. So make sure you guys get subscribed to that as soon as you can, because we want to get this off of being on two separate YouTube channels and get it to one central place where you can all tune in and see these. This will be posted in audio form. If you got in here late and you didn't get to see the whole thing and you want to listen to it while you're driving to work, that'll be out probably either this week or next week.
It'll be the 17th. It'll be published February 17th. And if everybody wants to join us next week for a live stream, I don't think that we've said yet, but our guests are the Strawbridge family. So
yes,
an entire family of thru hikers.
And they're getting ready to start the Appalachian Trail, and it is their last of the Triple Crown. They've already done, as a family, the PCT and the CDT. And when I mean a family, there's like 6 or 7 of them. And it's just an awesome story. And so make sure you tune in next week so you guys can meet with them and see them. And also this week, we are recording a podcast with, I think you talked about it earlier, with Heather Anish Anderson. and we're really excited about getting to talk to her. And that's an audio only podcast, so that's going to be out. I guess it'll be next week when that one comes out.
Yeah, that'd be the 24th is when we're going to publish that. So stay tuned. Big things coming.
We're having a blast with this stuff. So thanks so much, guys, for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next one.
Adios.